The crazy story of Gladys Chania. Rich politician who killed her husband for loving another woman. On September 13, 2022, 58-year-old Rwandan-based businessman George Mwangi traveled back to Kenya from his company to enjoy his leave. In his mind, everything was fine. But to his dear wife, Gladys Chania, nothing was okay. This trip was another painful reminder of how their marriage was failing, despite surviving 20 years. Why it was failing, she didn't know. But who was fueling its failure, she knew. That was none other than Lucy Muthoni, a pretty teacher who had swept her husband George off his feet. Wondering how it got here? Here's the gist. Gladys Chania is a politician and a counseling psychologist who started out as a teacher in Mwingi district in 1995. 2 years later, she resigned due to hardships and worked as a Red Cross coordinator posted in various Thika hospitals training midwives. She was also involved in charity organizations and was a member of the Kenya Scouts organization, where she took various kids for camps and training for skills development. As she positively impacted her community, she met one George Mwangi, a decent young engineer who was smitten by her curvaceous body and passion for community service. The two quickly fell in love and got married, a union that lasted 20 years and gave birth to 3 beautiful kids whom they loved and cared for in Christian ways. George supported her in everything, even as she left him with the kids and flew to the US in 2004 to pursue a bachelor's degree in sociology at Phoenix University in Arizona, and later a master's degree in child psychology at Leicester University in the UK. Years later, Gladys Chania earned her papers from the prestigious institutions and came back to Kenya, establishing the Right Home Rehab Center in Thika, where she was the main psychologist. Out of office, Gladys worked with the Thika community, inspired young girls at schools, and helped those incarcerated at Thika Women's Prison with food aid and mentorship. Deeds that made her rub shoulders with political heavyweights in the country earned her a nomination to vie for the Kiambu Women Rep seat under the Jubilee ticket in 2022. She failed but fell into the arms of KANU, where she's the Women Congress National Secretary. As she scaled heights in her fields, George Mwangi also excelled as a civil engineer, building his family a palatial home in Mangu to live in and residential rentals to earn from in retirement. Business was good, and he expanded to Kigali, Rwanda, where he set up his own company named Double M International, which forced him to move there to make it as successful as his deals in Kenya. His wife moved to Thika, where her rehab center was located, and also for ease of working as she built yet another business they had started together, that of events and planning. The two workaholics enjoyed their marriage of 20-plus years, building an empire and support system that would be her source of courage as she strongly campaigned for the Kiambu Women Rep seat. However, like normal couples, they were faced with problems, mostly because of the long distance and friction of work schedules. When George flew back from Rwanda, he wanted to rest with his family at his Mangu home. But his wife's involvement with the community and political world could not afford her the luxury of retiring to a village, so she opted to rent a home in Kimathi Estate, Thika, for ease. That did not sit well with George, who was quickly approaching retirement age. Loneliness pressured him to open his heart for options since he desired to live his old days with love. Gladly, the Lord answered his prayer when he was approached by a lady seeking to rent his house. That lady was new in town and had been impressed by the rental units George Mwangi had built next to his palatial home. On meeting her, George was dumbfounded. So he slowly courted the young mama who was a teacher at a local school. Love brewed, and George granted Lucy Muthoni a wish any Kenyan tenant would love, that of not paying monthly rent. Sadly, this was the signal that gave away their brewing romance to his wife, Gladys. She noticed that one house was not paying rent, and upon inquiry, she was told by her caretaker, "Boss said we don't request rent." She was angered and bothered by the secret request by her husband. So she decided to find out the tenant's identity. On meeting her, she realized she was facing her soon-to-be co-wife and scared her away using her political status. "Unajua mimi ni nani? Unacheza na bwana yangu?" Later, she confronted her husband of 20 years, expecting an apology but was served with shock as George confessed to falling in love with Lucy and actually thinking of adding her as a second wife. Gladys Chania was angered. This could not be real. This blatant admission of cheating by her husband worked Gladys up. She wondered what she lacked for George to seek comfort from another babe. She was curvaceous, had money, power, and all. However, all these never seemed to interest George more than the comfort of a present and submissive wife, whom he found in Lucy Muthoni. He invited her to keep him company at his Mangu home sometimes, where she took selfies. In addition, he allowed her to drive him in his KBY 849M Hilux car, as they went to various entertainment joints around town every time George flew back into the country from Rwanda. They were inseparable. This new relationship widened the gap between Gladys and George, with Gladys now opting to stay at her Thika home, away from the temptations of harming her new co-wife. Since it was campaign period, Gladys's determination to win the Kiambu seat kept her busy on the road, trying to woo voters and forget whatever the heck was happening with her marriage. Meanwhile, George spent his holidays in Mangu in the warm company of Lucy, who he allowed to drive his car as they went to entertain themselves at different joints in town. Truly, he was living his best life. So, he decided to introduce Lucy to his family back at home. He no longer wanted to keep the affair a secret, and being an honorable man, he made known his love for Lucy to his sisters and mom. This introduction infuriated Gladys even more. First, the man allowed her not to pay rent, then brought her to his home, forcing her out. Then, he allowed her to drive their car, and now she was being introduced to the family. No. She felt betrayed. She felt betrayed and couldn't take it anymore. Anger got the best of her. So when George made his final trip to Kenya, she felt that she needed to teach him a lesson that would haunt her forever. Like his usual routine, George arrived from Rwanda for holiday on September 11th, 2022, and proceeded to his house in Mangu to enjoy the warmth of Lucy's thighs. Gladys, on the other hand, was at her home in Thika, enjoying the comfort of her silence and distance. She posted that she had a plan so bad that she asked the Lord to help her not seek revenge, and while at it, she sang worship songs seeking God's strength as she drove since the plan was dangerous.
Bwana u sehemu yangu, rafiki yangu wewe, katika safari yangu tatembea na wewe, pamoja na wewe, pamoja na wewe, katika safari yangu tatembea na wewe, mahali hapa sikutaka ili niheshimiwe, na yanikute mashaka sawa sawa na wewe, pamoja na wewe, pamoja na wewe, Elia kute mashaka sawa sawa na wewe, niongoze safarini mbele.
However, the pain of betrayal by her love pained her much, since she could no longer cook for him. So she came up with a plan to teach him a lesson. Cryptically, she left prints of her murder plan online. It's the events of October 8th, 2022 that pushed her to the edge. George called her to accompany him to an event at Kamunyu, and on arrival, she found Lucy driving their Toyota Hilux. That was an egg on her face and fueled her thirst for revenge. She attended the event but left earlier than the two. George, on the other hand, shared drinks with his friends in the company of Lucy. And after a beautiful evening, they left for Mangu, where he dropped Lucy at her apartment, promising to take her out the next day. What he didn't know was that these were his last moments alive. He parked his car at home and took the stairs up to his death location, his bedroom, where Gladys Chania lay in wait. As he retired to bed, she struck him with a metal bar, killing the tycoon instantly at a place he built and thought was his safest spot. The next time the tycoon was seen in public, he was wrapped up in TV carton boxes at Kieni Forest in Kiambu. A crime scene unseen and unprecedented. As George Mwangi lay in his pool of blood right in the room he built to make love to his wife-turned-killer, the view of the bloody scene threw Gladys into a panic. Anger had gotten the best of her, and this looked like a bad dream. A dream she wished could reverse itself as she crept into fear and sadness. However, the body needed to be disposed of. so there was no time for self-pity. Yes, she was feeling bad, but there was no way she was going down easily. So, she put her emotions aside and focused on finishing the job. The easy part was done, but the hard part was just beginning. Getting away with murder. Knowing that only a few have gotten away with it, she forged an escape route. From that moment onwards, her defense towards anyone calling her to ask about the engineer's whereabouts was that George left his home in the morning for a walk, leaving his phone and car behind at 10 a.m. Since then, she had not set her eyes on him. It was a good story to set the sleuths on a wild goose chase, as she looked for ideas to secretly dispose of the body without catching any attention. So, everything had to be home-sourced, since any purchase would be tracked. To act as a body bag, she looked for plastic disposal bag papers. Being a mama and not familiar with this game, she also needed help, but from someone who could keep a secret for his silence. That was to be her new farmhand, Morris Camus. Meanwhile, Lucy Mathoni woke up the next day jovial like a lark since a date with George awaited her later in the day, Sunday, October 10th, 2022. As usual, she called her babe to ask what time he was going to pick her, but sadly, the calls went unanswered. Having failed to reach George, she respectfully called one of George's friends to ask him to call Gladys Chania on her behalf, asking about his whereabouts. Sadly, the pal was given the fake story. George had left for a walk. That call informed Gladys that the public was in the know that the tycoon was missing, but she kept it calm, sticking to the script since the man was an adult. This she did as she cleaned the scene to conceal evidence. She even did a post on her FB page, trying to steer away the rumors that were now creeping up that her husband was missing. She settled for a history lesson, as she was now coming to the point where she needed to dispose of the body, due to the inadequacy of storage material. She resorted to using her TV boxes, sacks, and cement bags to conceal the body, which she was going to carry to the dumping site. However, she needed to first attend an interview on Kameme TV, just to stick to the script that everything was okay, and the tycoon wasn't missing before she could dump him. So, she went to advise couples on TV for good marriage. Afterwards, she left the studio and called George's mom, Wanjiru, to tell her that her son was missing and that she was going to report that to the police. However, she went home first to get rid of the body and sought the help of her farmhand, who loaded George's body into his car and set off to Kini Forest, Gatundu North, where she dumped him. Later on, she filed a missing person report on October 11, 2022, at 8 p.m. at Mwea Police Post in Gatundu North, vid OB number 18-11-10-2022, as she went home to try and now dispose of the bloody sheets. However, she was not lucky enough because sleuths moved into the house the next morning, tracing the tycoon's last steps and surprisingly recovering blood-soaked bedsheets, curtains, and clothes hidden in a locked room adjacent to the master bedroom. It was at this moment they realized the murder suspect and scene were right there in front of their eyes. Unhesitatingly, they arrested Gladys Chania and charged her with murder.